Hi, thank you for joining us today on episode 13, Lucky 13 of DALLÄSTHETIC podcast. Joining me today is Giovanni Valderas, a good friend and colleague and good person to have around in Dallas. I don't know that we've got much to talk about because you saw the video and all's well that ends well. And he's now engaged to the lovely TV reporter, and they've adopted the houses. And is that basically where we're going? No.
I wish. No. I wish, yeah.
So today's a nice opportunity to kind of talk about all the things like you can do with an art degree. And I'm always kind of wondering, when you hear these statistics, it's always like U.S. News and World Report or whatever. You know, every year people with art degrees make less than their peers. And I think it's probably the losers who don't know how to paint and try to be accountants are not making very much money. I'm just kidding.
Yeah,
I'm totally kidding. But I think you're communicating using abstract thought and creating a platform not only with your voice but with media, and I mean that automatically opens an artist up to a lot of possibilities. And I think we'll talk about some of the things that you're doing, that you've done, and I think it might give some people some ideas.
Yeah. It's funny because I always see those reports as well. I think the latest one was that someone who has a high school degree makes more money than someone with an art degree. So I thought that was interesting. But I think it's just like any profession. You just got to work hard at it. And but I honestly, I think artists are they're undervalued in a sense.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, we are creative problem solvers, and that's what we do, and that's what most of the artists that I know, they're pretty brilliant as far as their thought process and what the abilities the capabilities of what they have, and they're amazing. So yeah,
and I don't know, you see like little articles here and there about computers that'll be doing painting or whatever, and you can't outsource creativity. I think there'll come a time, probably in the not too distant future, when they're trying to figure out like a global minimum wage and all of this stuff, that artists will be like really truly valued for what they are, because I don't think that you'll ever be able to replicate the human touch and intuition.
Yeah.
But you've taken it, to a lot of different places. You teach. You still teach, correct?
I haven't taught in about 3 years.
Oh, okay.
I like to go back. I mean,
Yeah.
I still miss it, but it's something that I just don't have the time for right now. But I'm hoping one day I will. So, yeah.
And you're gallery director?
Assistant gallery
Assistant.
director.
Oh, yeah.
I got to make that clear, because
Very clear.
The boss man will no, he won't say anything.
You're an assistant in the gallery director world.
Yes, the assistant gallery director at Kirkhoper Fine Art.
That great gallery.
Thank you.
Always been one of my favorites. So we live kind of we understand the grind, and it's hard to find time to do other things, but you've been able to find time to still be creative and make art. And I've known you initially as an artist. You visited our West Village pop-up gallery like right before graduation in like 2012.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah, so it's going on a little bit of time, and you've been pretty well, really busy, the entire time, showing in Dallas and in Houston, kind of establishing an exchange early on. What are some highlights, would you say, of the kind of studio portion of your career thus far?
Oh gosh, I mean, when I first graduated in 2012, and I was doing the adjunct grind, which I think everyone who graduates with an MFA, they do. Although it sucked, not having a steady gig or not knowing if your class is going to make the next semester, but what I did appreciate was the amount of studio time that I had when I was teaching. So I would have, 2 days out of the week off. And so that allowed me to really kind of sit with the work and really think about what I want to do. But just the time was really valuable. So I missed that. But just really just beautiful things. Like I've been fortunate to have, like studio visits with like curators and things like that. And sometimes nothing comes of it, but just to have that sit down and have other people talk about the work and how they interpret it also is really beneficial for me. So I think those are some pretty good highlights about the work. And also it's like really meditative for me just to make the work. And it's something that I miss a lot. And I try to get back in the studio. I try to schedule everything in my life so that way I have a little bit of time to make work and be an advocate and go to work.
So I know that a lot of the work that I've seen in recent years has been text-based, very textural. I know initially you were doing some figurative work. Are you still kind of working in with the various themes?
Yeah, definitely various themes. But I've kind of broken away from the figurative stuff only because I felt like during that time I was ready to transition into something new and different. And for me, I think I'll go back to it eventually one day, but right now I'm kind of just focused on creating this kind of public art placemaking.
Yeah.
So yeah.
This is a big topic, so it's about time we arrive on it. I think I've said this before, and I don't know whether this is like inappropriate or not. I feel like text-based art, I've always loved it. I feel like it's like the hip hop of visual art.
Yeah.
It gets straight to the point. Not everyone's going to get it, and it's like very necessary. And the first piece that I saw from the series of work that you've been doing was at the MAC a couple years ago, and you've been working with the pomper, the piñata,
the fringe,
the fringe, and it was. I can't pronounce. It was no hay pedo. No hay pedo.
Yeah.
Which is kind of nothing's going on here. Or...
It means it's not a problem or it's no big deal. Yeah. But the literal translation means there's no fart, and so it makes completely no sense to someone who is not like. No hay pedo is this thing that it's a slang idiom. So someone who speaks proper Spanish or who is learning proper Spanish, they won't really understand it. It's something that just comes from the community. It's just inherently ours, and so we get it. It's like a slang. So yeah, and that's what I loved about that. This idea that this vocabulary that we use with one another. That there is this misunderstanding between two different cultures. Yeah. But inherently we're kind of the same, So I really love that kind of wordplay. Like on the one hand, it doesn't make any sense, but on the other, like it does. So yeah.
I like that you bring out, the ambiguities with the colloquialisms and whatnot. I got on Google Translate and, did my best to familiarize myself with everything. And I could see that there weren't direct translations for a lot, but some of it, on the surface, at No hay pedo, it's there's no problems basically.
Yeah, there's no problem.
I mean, that's kind of the Dallas way. And where you've placed them, I think has been remarkable. You see progress and development. And, a lot of people would celebrate that or are celebrating that. And there are inherently problems with any progress. There are going to be pitfalls. And having the Casitas Triste.
Man, you're doing really well, man.
I did take Spanish 1 and 2 in high school. But having them out there in front of these 5-story, apartment blocks being built, in Bishop Arts or near Bishop Street, I would say, and just there's no problem, It's just it makes so much sense that needs to be pointed out. Yeah. And people, they'll casually talk about displacement, you know, but it's so far removed from so many people. When did you begin working on, you know, issues of housing in your artwork?
Gosh, I want to say it was late 2015. I remember the exact day that it happened, and I think it was a combination of just different things. I was teaching at Mountain View College, and I was teaching art appreciation, and when my students would come in, you know, if you've ever taught at a community college or a university or both, you see stark differences, right? Yeah, you have a different set at Mountain View College. I had a different set of students who came from all different age groups, all different socioeconomic backgrounds, but just a different set of responsibilities. And so they were basically, you know, going to school part-time, trying to make it while going to their full-time job. And so although it had different, all different kinds of students, the one thing they all agreed on was that they all hated art. They were in my art appreciation class. So I had to really adopt this missionary spirit and kind of help convert them into being art lovers. But you know, when I would sit and talk about paintings, you know, that were super conceptual, you know, I began to realize that, you know, art can be intimidating. And the only reason it was intimidating for them because they had never been exposed to it. And I thought to myself, at that moment, myself as an artist, I wasn't doing my job, because until that time, most of my work was just ready for the gallery. And it, you know, in some ways, I felt like it was at least over their heads, you know, for my students when I would talk about my own work. And so I thought, you know, what can I do as an artist to reach them, because that became really more important to me than, let's say, a gallery audience. And so I had that in mind. And then one night I was at a stoplight and in Oak Cliff, where I grew up, and across the street from me, there was a new development happening, and it had this huge real estate sign. And as a kid, my cousins lived at this old apartment complex that they tore down, and I grew up going over there. And so there was nothing there. And then I thought, when I saw the sign, it was like what Moses in the burning bush. It just spoke to me. This sign said, basically, we're not building anything for you guys, for the existing community. And at that moment, sitting at that light, I thought, damn, I'm not an attorney. I'm not a lawyer. You know, I'm not a community organizer. I am none of that, you know. And so, because up until then, I felt like the narrative had been like, this is great for Oak Cliff. You know, Oak Cliff needed development, and it's great. All these luxury apartments and condominiums are coming in. But no one was talking about the displacement, the evictions that were happening, and all the working class and working poor people who are living in Oak Cliff now being forced out. And I felt, okay, I'm an artist, so let's call attention. If anything, I'm just going to make this art project, and then we're going to at least start a dialogue. And my hope was to start a dialogue, but also empower individuals to advocate for themselves and for affordable housing. So the first iteration was the real estate piñata signs that I would make that would mimic the real estate signs, and I would use those slang idioms. Again, using that as this kind of a megaphone to reach the community. And I love the idea of this aesthetic skirmish that was happening with the real estate sign and my faux piñata real estate sign, and how they were kind of talking to each other, but also talking at each other, also talking, you know, to the different audiences. And I really love that idea. So. Yeah,
it was an incredible dialogue. I mean, having those signs there as a prop, the real estate signs is just golden.
Yeah.
Aesthetically, clearly, your work was so much better. And, you know, I think their marketing people would argue that, but I mean, come on, seriously. And it had to have started a lot of conversations. I just remembered seeing a few in the neighborhood in the Cedars, and they stayed for a little while, and it blew my mind.
Yeah, and I love that. I love the ephemeral quality these things have, because they eventually break down, and fall apart. And I think it became a really great symbolism for what was happening to the Latinx community, that eventually that they too will fall away and disintegrate, because there's nowhere else to live, in a sense. And it's also, I also see these things as these offerings. Like, I think if you drive around anywhere, especially in a Latinx community, you'll see these kind of roadside memorials.
Yeah.
And so these things became that as well, because the brightly colored, festive signs and language and things like that were also an offering,
Yeah, it's so necessary. I mean, it's definitely kind of in memoriam of what was.
Mm-hmm.
And, I was thinking about it earlier today. I think I was reading something that, a quote, and you were talking about there needed to be more panaderias and mechanics. And you were describing kind of, the perfect, like the Mr. Rogers neighborhood or Sesame Street,
Yeah.
like the America that, we're supposed to have access to. And, you start to notice in Oak Cliff, it was the quinceañera stores were disappearing.
Yeah.
And, but then little by little, everything. And, we'll get, I don't know what's popular these days, but, more chain restaurants or more bank branches.
Yeah.
No, you don't really have bank branches in some of these neighborhoods yet. But it's definitely a memorial. And then the one that you have another quote that's essentially "see you around."
Mm-hmm.
And how does that go?
It says it means "I'll see you later." Ahí te miro, which
Ahí te
means
miro.
"I'll see you later," which I think for me was really poignant because if we think about Latinx families and just us as in general, I think we endure a lot.
Oh my God! Yeah.
And the fact that it's never goodbye. It's always "I'll see you later." That we're gonna go through this issue that we're having, no matter how big it is, or how challenging it is. We're gonna make it through the other side because
Yeah.
that's what we do. And I think every individual goes through that as well.
Yeah, for sure. And it's just it's something to think about that. There were issues with redlining and all of that. Throughout most of the 20th century, and we're still dealing with that. And then you've got families that have dealt with migration through, much of their family history is having to migrate around the city and to who knows where.
Yeah.
I noticed in the Cedars near our gallery, there was a neighborhood off of Hickory Street near Beaumont. And I don't know how many apartment buildings. I'd say probably 3 solid blocks.
Yeah.
And then just overnight it was gone. And the loss is noticeable. You don't see people milling around, on their way to and from school, to the store, riding bikes, just hanging out, whatever. All of a sudden, there's this kind of blight. But on the other hand, you've got a whole population excited about the new, development, but from the same people that built maybe Farmers Market or something along those lines. And then Trinity Groves is nice for a lot of people. But when you really stop and think about La Bajada and all the changes that neighborhood's gone through, you must know the answer. Where are people going?
I don't actually know, but I have a feeling that they're moving to the suburbs, further out, which means their commute gets longer, because they probably still work in the same area. But I have a friend who's a principal in Garland, and he says he's been seeing a lot of influx of new people come in, and usually from working class to working poor people. And so that for me, that's pretty troubling that this city is not making any headway to keep these families here. I know there's a big push to bring in middle class families, which I think this city needs, but also it's important to keep the individuals that invested here. When I think about all the Latino and Latina businesses that opened up on Jefferson or anywhere in Oak Cliff, most of them did it without city subsidies. They did it, you know, with their hard work and their own investment, and it made it work for them. And even though it may not look like a fancy new building, but it worked for the community, just like auto repair shops and things like that. That stuff benefited the community. And then I think what's most troubling is like when you have newer residents come in, you know, they're accustomed to seeing something else and having this idea of new, and so that doesn't fit their aesthetic. And for me, that's troubling, because, you know, again, these are working class, working poor people who are just trying to make ends meet, and this is what suits our needs. And so I think there's room for everyone, you know, but as this city is, I think, reluctant to create any real policy or any real investment in affordable housing. They keep creating like task force and things like that. But for me, it's just a perception of action. It doesn't do anything. So it's a little frustrating. Yeah.
Right. Every 6 months or so, they'll add 12 more people to a work group and, and give it a new name. And you'll see reports on Facebook and all this. And, you know, you wonder, you know, what can you do about it? And I guess you've been thinking about that for a while.
I have, yeah. You know, I realized with the Casita Triste project and the real estate signs, like I knew that advocacy only went so far. Like I wouldn't be able to trust someone who said they were going to do something about it, and then a year or 2 years from now, I'm disappointed in our elected officials. So I figured, you know, instead of putting all my faith into one individual, why not run myself? So I decided that I was going to run for city council and make the best of it, but also just represent everyone. Make sure that the Oak Cliff that I grew up in is an Oak Cliff that accepted everyone, you know, no matter your ethnicity or your race or how much money you made. You know, this Oak Cliff was for everyone. And that's the one that I want to continue. You know, not this new Oak Cliff where we're getting like this uptownization of Oak Cliff, where you're knocking down green historic buildings and taking away green spaces to build these kind of behemoth buildings that only wealthy individuals can afford to live there. You know, like I think there's a big push for like young professionals, and that's great. You know, but again, asking for a one bedroom, maybe at best $1,000 for a family of 4, you know, that's pretty hard for someone to make it. Imagine having 3 kids in one bedroom, you know, it's just not possible. So we just need to double down on our investments. So
I know it's down the road and you haven't made policy yet or anything. So, you know, it wouldn't be fair to like ask, well, what are you going to do about it? But I think being an Oak Cliff, being a working artist, being from Oak Cliff, having a worldview that, you know, is really inclusive, you know, I would think that you should do fairly well there. There are a lot of artists in Oak Cliff. And, you know, I did read an article that I think in Medium, where they were talking about what if more artists ran for office. And I think you were in a workshop last year.
I was, yeah.
Well, tell me about that.
It was fantastic. It was a workshop called, gosh, I can't remember the name. But basically they held a how to run for office workshop for artists. And we were part of the first cohort. And we had to go through like a background check and interviews and things like that. But they all flew us up to Detroit, and I met so many different artists, and the ideas were amazing that everyone had, and it was like a weekend boot camp kind of thing. So we basically sat all day, and they just taught us how to run a campaign, and it was just really a crash course, and I think it was really informative, and it made the idea of running not so scary. And it was really informative. And I hope they're doing it again, but I'm not sure. But yeah.
But for someone who's a doer, you know, sitting back, I think, and not, you know, taking that route would probably be more difficult. You know.
Well, you know, that's why I want to run, because I want to do things. I don't want to like talk about it or have task force meetings or subcommittee meetings. And although you know that's standard and it comes with it, but when I served on the Cultural Affairs Commission, you know, I made up 3 goals that I wanted to accomplish, and I got 2 of them executed. It's because I came in wanting to do something. And I think a lot of times, I think some of the slip-ups with people who run for office is that they get complacent. And for me, I never want to do this for the rest of my life. You know, I want to put in like at least 2 years, because that's how long a first term goes, and at the most 6, and then I'm going to hand it off to someone else. And so within that time frame, I want to get as much done as possible. And I think it just goes back to being an artist. You know, we're doers. We don't want to sit around and talk about ideas. We want to put them to work and get at it. So I think for me, it's I wish that more artists would do that, you know, because like I said, they're the most creative-minded individuals that we know, and if we put that towards policy, it could be amazing. So
no question. So do you call it, is it activist art or social justice work or what? You know, there's kind of an umbrella for this type of work. What would you say?
You know, I don't know. Like I feel weird calling myself like an activist, or you know, at best I'm an advocate in the sense, and because I've met the real activists, and they are activists, and I just kind of follow in their trail. But I feel like, you know, I wanted to bring attention to certain issues that affected me and that I was close to. You know, like when I was growing up, my mother, we struggled a lot in the beginning. Like we would move house to house because the rent would go up, and you know, she was from Guatemala, so you know, her English wasn't the best. And so she really struggled to kind of make ends meet in a sense. And so when I think about that, you know, these are people that need to have voices.
Yeah. And I mean, a leader, more or less, or a cheerleader, you know, you've got a way of communicating, and you can bring visual aids to the table, and, you know, it's something that's like truly valuable. I'd love to see, you know, a future where there are more voices in the public sphere who don't have law degrees, and, you know, maybe, you know, didn't run pharmaceutical companies first, or whatever it might have been, developers.
Yeah,
you know, there's got to be a mix.
Yeah, definitely. We need a variety of different voices at the table to bring different perspectives. I mean, what I think is so great is that one day I hope that the city and businesses and other people of different sectors, they realize how important arts and culture can be, because that can be the catalyst to bring everyone together. Because, you know, arts just has that way of doing things, of bringing in. And so when I try to do things that, let's say, talking about zoning, how do I attract people who normally wouldn't come to these meetings? And it's really about speaking to their needs and using their culture to kind of bring them in a sense. And so if we use terminology that they're used to, visual cues that will get them excited, then they will come. You know, we just haven't been speaking to them. So yeah,
makes perfect sense. I know that in the past I'd done some volunteer work with the Children's Advocacy Center, and I know that most of their breakthroughs, or a lot of their breakthroughs, happen during art therapy. You see it like in the corporate environment, you know, these training sessions. I mean, people do reluctantly often, you know, reach that kind of that, you know, realization through art. I know that it's not going to be for every artist, you know. And I would never, you know, even suggest that, like, oh, you've got to take up a cause, you know. I think creating is you know, a gift, and more than enough for a lot of artists, most artists. But if somebody, you know, had an itch and felt like, you know, they might want to do more, you know, what would be your advice in terms of, like, how do you start?
Gosh, you know, I think it's not feeling that you need permission and just going out and doing it. I felt like, you know, what was really interesting to me was that when the moment I started doing this kind of guerrilla site-specific artwork thing, how liberating that was. Because at that moment I realized, you know, because when we come out of grad school, you know, that's kind of what is instilled in us, is just to build up our CVs, get as many gallery shows as possible, get representation, and maybe set yourself up for a tenure track position. But the moment I started kind of doing this work for the community was really liberating in the sense that I was no longer beholden to those rules anymore. Like, if I wanted a show, I could do it whenever I wanted to. And ironically, doing all that, I think, gave me the most recognition ever, through media. And I felt like that was really a blessing, and taking that risk and putting these things out there and not knowing how they were going to be received. But it was really rewarding. And I think if any artist wants to do that, just do it, find something you really care about. And for me, I started just by listening. I would go to a lot of community meetings, and I heard about, how Dallas is having an affordable housing crisis. No one could find a affordable place to live in this city, and there's something wrong with that. So I thought to myself, well, if this city's unwilling to do anything about it, well, I'll go ahead and call attention to it and maybe shame them for doing that. And so, like, the Casita Triste project, it went national as far as the story goes, and I thought that was really impressive. But also, I hope it sent a message to this city that we're not doing enough. And my hope is to continue to push it, push that envelope. And I think any artist can do that. So yeah.
Well, and really anybody with a drive and a cause.
That's true. Yeah. But artists are super creative. You
yeah.
know, we engage differently, and I love that. Like, what I love about the Casita Triste project, these sad little houses, they drew a lot of empathy. They had these kind of anthropomorphic faces, and so people would take them, put them on their porch. They would take on a life of their own. They'd end up on one corner, and then on the next week they're on a different corner. They would just kind of migrate. Yeah, it was really interesting, and so I really love that idea, and that people, they genuinely cared about these objects. So
yeah. I mean, they really, really seem to have life to them. I mean, they really, really do. You did a great job with that.
Yeah, and I decided to use the house because I was actually working with Sunset Studios doing a project with them, and we're going to do a workshop, and I thought, how do I make something that everyone else could make? And then Rachel Rushing and I were talking, and then she's like, and we settled on this idea of a house because homes and Latinx families is just a strong connection. And then I see all these brightly painted homes, and it reminds me of what Oak Cliff is. And so I was like, that's it. And then I went home and I made a little mock-up, and then at that moment I put a little sad face on them, and then it resonated with me. I was like, I think I'm gonna go put this somewhere in the community. And then I started making these bigger versions. So now I'm up to like around 30 of them. So,
that's amazing. Mm-hmm. So cool.
Yeah. But yeah, they've taken on, it's funny, before I came in, these things, again, they take on a life of their own. Someone sent me a message and they said, can I dress up one for Halloween? I was like, sure.
Yeah.
He's like, I don't want to be offensive or anything. I don't want to like disrespect what you're doing. I was like, no, please go ahead. And I was like, that's just going to
add to the conversation.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I thought that was great. So.
That is great.
Yeah.
Now I can't do it.
You should. Anybody should do it.
Anybody should do it.
Yeah. Shoot, I may even do it. So yeah.
You should.
Yeah.
Nobody would ever guess it was you.
I know.
Well, I'm really, excited to see how things, unfold. I can't get up and vote in District 1. I don't live there. And I learned today that the election for city council in District 1 does not happen like right now.
Nope.
So you've got some time to prepare, and people can help you campaign. And the election will be held in May.
Yeah, early May. Here's the thing that people don't know. Most elections for municipalities happen in May. And I think it's a way to kind of make people not turn out to vote.
Yeah.
But the thing that most people don't know is that their elected officials, especially the city council members, they're elected for you, right?
Yeah.
Because there's such low voter turnout, whoever is anointed usually wins, and it takes a lot of money. I think I've talked to like 3 elected officials already, and they've all told me they've self-funded themselves, and with $30,000, and that I don't have, But what I do have is, my hope is that I do have is the people. So that they have the money, we have the people in a sense. And so if we can just grassroots organize, get people out, knocking on doors, engage people who haven't been engaged before, and talk about the real needs of our city, and how we can improve that. Let's talk about the neighborhoods that have been forgotten, where they need development. As far just fixing up their streets would go a long way.
Yeah, development doesn't have to be like a bad thing.
Yeah. And for me, like, people always ask me, "Are you against the development?" I was like, "No, I'm for responsible development. Build stuff for everyone, and I think that would be good." But you just don't build something for rich people. It's just not going to work. So yeah, I feel like this run is just really symbolic of just individuals who are just getting fed up with the way things aren't working in their favor. And and my hope is that if people see my run, that they will be inspired to run as well for anything, for school board, or just for anything really, PTA president or precinct, chair. Just run for anything, because we need more good people. I mean, not like people who just want to be career politicians. So yeah.
I agree with you. No question. So you've got hashtags.
So part of the way of just energizing the community is speaking to them in their language. So, Latina mothers, they always come after you with a sandal, and they call it chanclas, and they try to beat you with it, to make you understand. So yeah.
So it's chanclas.
It's called Chancla Squad. That's hashtag Chancla Squad, which means it's like, you're going to be part of my squad, and we're going to go out and get voters. Nice. So yeah. But I think it'll be great. So anyone can just Google your name, Giovanni Valderas. Yeah. Google election with your name. They'll find your Twitter. They'll find your Facebook. Yeah. So it's Giovanni Valderas for Oak Cliff on Facebook. So you can just Google or look for that. And I'm building my website right now. So for the election. And we didn't really have a chance to talk much about the art. So Google is art. It's online. GiovanniValderas.com. GiovanniValderas.com, a world of knowledge and talent. I want to thank you again for joining today. Really enjoyed the conversation. Thank you, Jordan. I really appreciate it as well. It's always great to talk to you. Yeah. All right. Well, that's it for today.